Ms. Gunasekara, you're here advocating, I heard you mention the CO2 Coalition a few times. You believe they should have a credible seat at the table in climate policy, correct?
Yeah, I believe all scientists should have a credible seat
Thank
at
you.
the
So
table.
the CO2 Coalition, are you aware that they are primarily funded by the Mercer family and the Koch brothers?
So I'm not familiar with the makings of the institution. I just recently came on board as an advisor that works with them, but I'm not a part of the infrastructure, so to speak.
So you may be unwitting to the fact that this coalition that you're a part of is funded by the Mercer family and the Koch brothers. Are you aware that the Koch brothers own oil refineries across several states in the United States and control some 4,000 miles of gas pipeline and infrastructure?
Yes.
Do you think that there may be any role in their financing with the CO2 Coalition with the advancement of their private interests?
Again, I don't know about the financing with regard to the CO2 Coalition. I'll say my engagement with them, though, is not unwitting. It is active and inspired and educated, because a lot of these folks are scientists that have long been diminished and ignored.
So you knowingly
and the
work
CO2
for the
Coalition
Koch reclaiming my time. So you knowingly
has provided a platform for them to provide reality and balance in the context of the climate discussion.
Understood. Thank you for your testimony that you are not unwittingly working for the Koch brothers. Dr. Ali, we don't often think about climate change as a civil rights issue, but global warming is already wreaking havoc and displacing populations across the country and around the world. I've seen your work in climate justice and environmental justice. Can you talk to me a little bit about the consequences for communities of color on not acting on climate change?
Well, if we don't act, then we are going to lose more lives. We're going to lose more African-American lives, more Latinx lives, more Asian Pacific Islander lives, more indigenous lives. We're going to lose more lives of white, low-income brothers and sisters as well, because all of them are the ones who are placed right on the front lines of many of these things that are going on. When you look at all of these places where the flooding is going on, you find that there are poor people who are there. You find that there are communities of colors who are the ones who, after they're hit, they can't come back home. If you look in the Little Petey area in South Carolina, the Little Petey River, folks who were hit by the floods that came through there now have the burden of having to raise their homes to be able to get insurance and to be able to come back home. And if they lose their homes, then they lose that generational wealth. And we see these things playing out all across the country.
Do you recall roughly how many people died in Hurricane Katrina?
3,000 plus.
3,000. Do you recall how many died in Hurricane Maria?
Over 3,000.
Yeah, it's around 3,000 as well. So we're talking about 6,000 predominantly black and brown lives that are wiped out. And in terms of the science and the modeling, do we see largely that it's the global south and communities of color that may be bearing the brunt of the initial havoc from climate change?
Without a doubt, without a doubt. And least likely to be able to escape or to make the transitions that others who maybe have more wealth can do.
And in terms of that wealth, the people who are producing climate change, the folks that are responsible for the largest amount of emissions, or communities or corporations, they tend to be predominantly white, correct?
Yes, and every study backs that up.
And so I think it's important that we put into context here, there's a difference between an electricity bill and people's lives. You know, my own grandfather died in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, and we can't act as though the inertia and history of colonization doesn't play a role in this, that we didn't treat their lives equally as if a different community were hit. Can you speak a little bit more to some of the specific communities that you've encountered in your work and the climate injustices that you've witnessed?
Every place from Alaska with the Gwich'in people and a number of others who are losing their culture. They can no longer fish and hunt in the places because of the changes that are happening. Along the Gulf Coast, when you go to Cancer Alley and you see between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, you know, African-American communities, other low-income communities who moved there after slavery was there, then all of these petrochemical facilities, literally as far as you can see, chemical plants, petrochemical plants, all these different things, and the folks can't escape because their housing values have now decreased so much that they can't move anywhere else. You can literally go across our country and see these impacts that are happening. And that's the most frustrating thing about these conversations, is that we never talk about people's lives. We don't talk about people's lives in Appalachia in a serious way about the public health impacts that are happening to them. We don't talk about the people in the Rust Belt and the public health impacts that are happening and how their lives are being cut short also. We don't have a serious conversation, and I appreciated what the congressman shared about that he had a business that's there, an industry that's in his community. In Appalachia, in West Virginia, where I lived, we knew for decades that the coal industry was constricting and was going to eventually, die out. And politicians were not thinking critically about what are the new industries that we should be getting in there. So when we talk about wind and solar and thermal and all these other opportunities, we do a disservice to our most vulnerable communities when we don't provide these new sets of opportunities for them. And when we don't, and when we prop up and support this fossil fuel industry that is impacting their lives, then we have some culpability in that. And I know no one is intentionally trying to kill people and hurt people. This issue of the environment has become one that has become politicized, and it shouldn't be. The environment should never be politicized, and we do not have to choose between the environment and jobs. That is a 20th century paradigm that no longer can be in place because the IPCC report, the National Climate Assessment report, they are very clear. These scientists are not biased. They are telling us what's about to happen. And if we are not willing to do what's right, then we are responsible for our children's lives and our children's children's lives. We're going to have to deal with these impacts.